14 hours in Johannesburg, South Africa. It's 12 hours in Accra. This is Midday Live. My name is Bright Nana Amfo. Thanks so much for staying there for us. Let's start from here with the top stories. International Maritime Organization legal expert Dr. Kofi wants Ghana to engage Togo in a discussion to prevent any future maritime dispute. We'll tell you more about exactly what he wants Togo and Ghana to do. Ghana Maritime Authority increases safety charges on ships without parliamentary approval. Also coming up, the Christian Health Association of Ghana wants mental health included in National Health Insurance Scheme. And on business will tell you that the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana maintains prime rate at 21%. On international front, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe calls for an early election and will dissolve parliament on Thursday. Of course, the details coming up in the next 1 hour. This is where we beginning from. Legal practitioner and former Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, Chachu Chikata, says Ghana should look beyond the oil and gas exploration and take advantage to maximize all available resources after the success chalked in the maritime dispute. But before we bring you that story, the International Maritime Organization legal expert Dr. Kofi wants Ghana to engage in the discussion with Togo to prevent any future maritime border dispute. He was speaking at the Media General News lecture on the ruling by the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea.
I must say that, the fact that we are talking about resources makes it very important. So it's not just a mass of water that comes to us, but it encompasses our oil and gas resources. And now that the boundary has been drawn, and those oil and gas resources are in our territory, it is very significant. Remember that the President talked about the fact that we're going to use our mineral resources for education, and I'm sure for other things. So certainly, if this had gone against us, it would have had very negative repercussions on us. People who want to invest, did not have confidence in coming to Ghana to invest because of this lingering maritime boundary dispute. But now that it is resolved, I think it's very significant. It gives a positive signal to all those who would want to come and invest, not only in oil and gas, but also in other areas or fields of endeavor. We look at our maritime spaces where they do overlap so that we can do the demarcation as early as possible. Right now, I don't think between us we have any significant known resources in that area. That is the best time to do negotiations, because once you begin to find resources, then tensions are high. So I think that we must work very quickly towards our boundary with Togo, especially since GNPC is doing some work in the Volta Basin.
Let's stay on this issue. A legal practitioner and former Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, Chachu Chikata, says Ghana should look beyond oil and gas exploration and take advantage to maximize all available resources after the success chalked in the maritime dispute. Speaking on TV3's Current Affairs program Agenda, he says the former Attorney General's decision to bring all stakeholders on board and the current government decision to stay with the plan led to Ghana winning over La Côte d'Ivoire.
The win on the disputed maritime border between Ivory Coast and Ghana has increased the country's expectations to maximize profit in the oil sector. Some experts have been speaking on the judgment, trying to break it down to the understanding of the ordinary Ghanaian. During TV3's Current Affairs program Agenda on Sunday, former Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, Chachu Chikata, says the judgment in favor of Ghana should go beyond oil and gas exploration.
We should begin to pay more attention also to our fisheries and the potential of our fisheries. Just as we invite investors from all over the world to look at that potential as far as oil and gas is concerned. I think maybe on the basis of this decision, highlighting the fisheries element of the jurisdiction that we now have in this area, we should pay more attention to that.
Governance expert Dr. Odro called for a consensus approach in enforcing the judgment.
When they all come back to Ghana, there should be a joint meeting, either in Ghana or in Cote d'Ivoire, and then we can come up with a roadmap towards implementing the court's decisions. So I think, but we should go ahead and then run sensitization programs, awareness raising programs, explain things to people so that the laymen and women in the field can also understand.
Energy expert Kwame Jantua argues the judgment should reflect every national agenda, stressing issues in the country should be devoid of politics.
And there's something about Ghana. When something like this happens, we don't build on it in other sectors, in other areas. It happens and then we park it somewhere and then we go back to what we are used to. I think this is a good litmus test, because 3 presidents were involved. 2 attorney generals were involved. There were people who had worked in the past administration and in the present administration who were part and parcel of it.
We're staying on this issue, and the cost to the taxpayer, of course, comes into a sharp focus. But exactly who paid for what? My guest in the studio, Dr. Steve Mantio of Asiedu-Dartey, will help me to discuss this. Good afternoon and grateful for your time. International litigations are quite expensive, so certainly Ghana was expected to spend some money. But is that the worry, or perhaps where the money came from, is what we should be concerned about?
Right, thank you very much. And I think your question bordered on how much it costs the taxpayer. It did not cost the taxpayer anything, because the financing of the litigation on the Ghana side did not come from taxes. It came from petroleum revenues. But it did not come from the government's share of petroleum revenues, which is the annual budget funding amount. If it did, there would have been no worry.
Right.
But it came from GNPC's own allocation of petroleum revenues. Monies meant for exploratory and development activities. And the worry arises because GNPC, at the beginning of the year, would submit its work program to Parliament for approval. And on the basis of this, allocations are made to GNPC. So if monies meant for activities such as exploration are used, or misapplied, in this case I would say so, on litigation, then it raises serious concerns.
I see. Can we use misapplied in that sense here?
Yeah, we can say misapplication, because if the expenditure was budgeted for, then it wouldn't be misapplication. But to the extent that the expenditure was not part of GNPC's own approved plan of work for the year, then of course it becomes misapplication. But I'm not by this suggesting that GNPC shouldn't have finance if government had a difficulty in raising the necessary financial resources to take care of our litigation. But the concern is this: if GNPC came up with the money, we want to see some agreement between GNPC and the government in terms of how this money is repaid, so GNPCs will have the money for the purposes for which it was allocated in the first place.
Let's take the ordinary man on this, who says that I budgeted for the year. I did not budget for any legal issue. In the middle of the year, my family runs into trouble, and I use the money to do that.
Yeah, but if it is your own litigation, of course, then it is justifiable. Let me make the point that all over the world, the concern about national oil companies has been the tendency for them to be treated as slush fund, doing things that the state ought to do. And it leads to abuse of resources that are allocated to national oil companies. In some instances, when these things are not checked, they lead to even the national oil company financing political activities for the incumbent government. And that is why we all are careful not to allow the national oil companies to do things that the state ought to do from the taxes.
What could have been done here? GNPC should have hinted government of this and gotten an order to go ahead, or what should have been the situation?
I do not think GNPC did this on their own volition. I suspect they were ordered to come up with the money, given the financial crisis that we've been through in the last couple of years. And so GNPC was forced to come up with the money. That is not a concern. The concern has to do with what agreement government entered into with GNPC in terms of refunding the money to GNPC when it is able. We've had similar situation in the Western Corridor roads, where GNPC loaned some $50 million to the Ministry of Finance for the construction of arterial roads in the gas processing enclave. Now, there is no documentation showing any intent to repay the money to GNPC. And so the worry is that if you don't curtail these practices, then GNPC's need to focus on its core mandate will be derailed by this constant demand for GNPC to do things that are not part of their core mandate.
I see. Let's wrap up our conversation. So for you, it did not cost the taxpayer anything directly.
Directly,
but
yes.
That money came from the money from the revenue from oil.
That's right.
And so indirectly we have paid for it. And you mentioned about $3 million.
Yes, to the extent that, yes, about $3 million have been spent so far. And to the extent that the oil resources belong to all Ghanaians, then indirectly we have paid for it. But let me also make the point that there were other avenues within the Petroleum Revenue Management Act from which we could have actually taken money to finance this litigation.
Direct from government?
Yes.
Instead of going to GNPC?
Yes, exactly. Because the Petroleum Revenue Management Act allocates as much as 70% of net petroleum receipts to government's budget. So GNPC gets a portion of it, but it's for specific activities. So government should have taken the money from its share of petroleum revenues and not from GNPC's share.
You're still a member of PIAC?
I saw, yes, serve on the committee.
In this situation, what can PIAC do?
Well, PIAC can only raise it.
Right.
Let me say that
like you're doing now.
Exactly, because we have 3 mandates to execute under the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. First is to ensure compliance. Secondly is to provide platform for public debate on spending prospects. And thirdly, we are allowed to make an independent assessment of the management and use of petroleum revenues. So if PIAC is commenting on this, then it is part of its function in terms of making independent assessments.
Raise the red flags.
Exactly.
And cause the right thing to be done.
Sure.
I'm grateful to you. Dr. Steve Mantiao is the Executive Director of Asiedu-Dartey and also with PIAC. Campaign Coordinator of Asiedu-Dartey. Grateful for your time with us.
Thank you.
Right. This is a development story. We'll tell you more about that. And but you can go to 3news.com and read more of that. Now, let's move away from the Atlas ruling. Ghana missed out on achieving the MDG goals 4 and 5 for reducing child and maternal mortality. But the country stands a chance of achieving the Sustainable Development Goal 3 on good health and well-being. An obstetrician gynecologist at the Komfo-Anokye Teaching Hospital, Dr. Ernest Kwakun, says Ghana needs to stay focused on attaining the SDG Goal 3. Ibrahim Abubakar has more on this story.
The agenda of promoting adolescent sexual and reproductive health.
Yes, I think we still have some way to go, even though a lot of civil society are teaming up with health institutions to carry this agenda further. In my hospital, we have a special unit in charge of sexual and adolescent reproductive health. Other hospitals also have it in the metropolis, and now it's been decentralized into the regions and to other areas. Schools are now picking up counseling units and occasionally are calling us, the experts, to also augment their counseling services. But I guess that as a nation, we were not able to meet our specific targets under the Millennium Development Goal 5. And therefore, here again, we've had a shift in paradigm towards the Sustainable Development Goal 3, where we need to be able to increase our coverage on sexual and adolescent reproduction, where the indices that we were measuring, adolescent pregnancy rates, and then contraceptive prevalence within the adolescent, will be able to push these things up such that no adolescents will have unprotected sex, will have abstinence from sex until they marry, when they have steady partners and avoid having, multiple partners. And then also that if they want to engage in sex, they will use the appropriate protection. If they have issues with their sexuality and their body image and other sexual preferences, including gayism and lesbianism, these are things that we need to continually work to improve. So we have some way to go, especially changing from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals tells you that we were not able to achieve our targets. That's why there's a paradigm shift. And we need to do this absolutely, and especially in conjunction with the second cycle schools.
Now, TV3 has intercepted a letter of resolution from the Ghana Maritime Authority indicating the current safety charge of 15 US cents per ton of gross tonnage for a ship has been abolished. GMA says regulations provides that any commercial vessel other than bulk carriers and oil tankers that call at a port or terminal within the Ghana maritime jurisdiction is now liable to pay 0.5% effective October 1, 2017. The 0.5% represent half of the weight of the ship. We're told also that, for instance, vessels under 0.15%, which paid $60,000 on a 40,000 gross tonnage of a vessel, will now pay $200,000 US. The authority says they are yet to seek parliamentary approval to reflect on the agreed charges. However, the increment, which is 150% on shipping lines, has attracted some agitations due to the repercussions of the shipping lines. Let's speak to the Vice Chairman of the Ship Owners and Agents Association, Imoro Ayana. He just joined me on the phone lines. Good afternoon, sir, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Great. So, can you confirm that indeed these are the charges that have been announced lately?
Yeah, that is correct.
And you are suggesting that it's been done without parliamentary approval?
I don't want to get into those issues. The bottom line is Ghana Maritime Authority is the authority responsible for, according to our act, some level of security on our sea. And so they have levied a charge, and we will comply as such.
I see. So you do not have any issues with the fact that perhaps these charges have not been approved by Parliament under the Act?
Listen, there are so many issues because previously, what we were also paying, because in the Act, in the LI, or is it the Act, I've forgotten what it is, it stated there as $1 per gross tonnage. That was in 2012. And the shipping lines made made our position clear or informed GMA at the time that it would affect business generally. It will affect shipping business, especially transshipment, and also it would increase the cost of doing business through our port because these are all pass-through charges. Somebody would have to pay for these charges. And then they reviewed it themselves and came back with the 15 cents and the 10 cents, respectively, until this year that they have proposed an upward adjustment to 50 cents.
So you're worried?
So when it comes to the legalities, when they send us, whatever they would let us know, we would look at the legal basis. If we have to comply, we'll comply. If not, we would call their attention to it.
Okay. Now, how worrying are these adjustments that have been made?
Say again, how worrying?
Exactly. How much does it cost ship owners and agents? And how worrying is that to your business?
You see, at the end of the day, we should look at it this way. Any charge, if you throw charges to the shipping line, charges such as this, this falls directly under the ISPS security charges. And if you throw it at them, they would have to pass it to the final consumer. we are not too happy with the increment, the jump. I mean, considering that port reforms are going on and, cost of doing business already is high. But as it is, Ghana Maritime also said that they needed the income to augment their activity. So we can make a point, but it's up to the authority to also, make their point.
Okay, so from 15 cents to 50 cents.
Yes.
What would have been appropriate?
We would have wished. Appropriateness is another story altogether. You have to look at it, sit down and do the math. But we would have wished that at least we maintain what it is today.
15 cents.
Until maybe, yes. So the situation, all these paperless and all the port reforms settle, then we could look at it. But yes, this is what it is. One of the challenges I personally have is the issue with transshipment. Because once you develop your port and you want to, especially Ghana, we always say we want to be a gateway to West Africa. Then if you look at consumption of import in Ghana, it's not going to warrant those volumes that will come through the port. So definitely transshipment is a factor in the whole port expansion issue. And this could adversely affect transshipment. So people would consider thermal ports twice before maybe they come in, unless CMA has some other plans or they have some other arrangements for transshipment cargo. I'm
grateful. Morayana, Vice Chair of Ship Owners and Agents Association, talking to me on some charges at the Tema port. In other stories, almost all Form 1 classrooms in most private senior high schools across the country are virtually empty. This is because the Computerized Schools Selection and Placement Secretariat has not posted students to these schools for fear of likely collapse of the schools. The heads of these institutions are asking government to come and save the situation.
$424,092 students qualified to be placed in the various senior high schools as well as technical, vocational and training schools under the Ghana Education Service across the country. They constitute the first batch of students to benefit from the free senior high school policy introduced by government. While some public senior high schools are faced with the challenge of providing space for fresh students, private senior high schools are struggling to get students to occupy their classrooms. This is in Sanya Senior High School here at Kaswa in the Central Region. A year ago by now, over 150 fresh students were already on admission, but the same story cannot be told this year. Here, academic work for fresh students is expected to commence on September 25. However, as at Wednesday, September 20, only 18 students had successfully gone through admission.
She was placed in a day school outside Accra, so I decided to bring her here.
Dora Akwele's story is a reflection of cases happening across the country since the implementation of the free senior high school policy. It appears that is one avenue private senior high schools can also record some significant numbers in the admission of fresh students.
By the next 2 years, if the system doesn't change, I'm sorry, this school has to shut its doors. Those who teach first years are virtually free. And the most unfortunate thing for us and for me as a headmaster is that every worker at Insania is a full-time worker. And you can't simply stand up and say, oh, I don't have students, I'm making you go.
The free SHS policy is in line with the Sustainable Development Goal 4 Target 1, which states by 2030, all boys and girls complete free, equitable and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. However, the policy seemed to have disadvantaged private senior high schools. At His Majesty Senior High School in Dansoman here in Accra, only 11 fresh students had been admitted.
In the private school, it is the numbers that helps us to get infrastructure and then the environment that is conducive for teaching and learning. Around this time, we should be expecting close to 100 students, between 50, 60 to 100 students. But currently we are below 20 students.
Samo Senior High School in Cape Coast and Hope College in Gomoafete in the Central Region, as well as Sunrise Senior High School and Williams Academy, both in the Volta region, have similar challenges. In 2005, the then Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport and the GES introduced the computerized schools selection and placement system as a way of replacing the manual way of selection and placement of students in senior high schools. But the system continued to be fraught with challenges, leading to frustrations by parents, head of schools and candidates.
I started this school going to Cape Coast, selecting cards after the public schools have chosen their students and gone. We, the private schools, also go for the remnant cards, and then we write to the students to come. It had its advantage, merits and demerits. So the new system that has come is not bad, but just that it should be all-inclusive.
Some stories gone by legal expert Dr. Kofi Mbia wants Ghana Maritime Authority to engage Togo in a discussion to prevent any maritime dispute, and some charges were told. The Ghana Maritime Authority has placed some charges on safety of ships without parliamentary approval. There's more coming up. Stay with us. This is Midday Live. In starting business, the Association of Ghana Industries, AGI, has proposed to government to offer more tax holidays to boost the confidence of the local businesses. The association noted tax reliefs would enable businesses employ more Ghanaians.
President of AGI, James Asareje, was speaking at the presidential luncheon organized by the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana, ICAG. He lauded government for providing tax exemptions in the 2017 budget, but called for regulations to prevent its abuse. Of major concern to the AGI president is the need for government to institute tax holidays to boost local businesses.
Many of our indigenous companies do not benefit from some of these investment incentives and subsidies, which is a major concern. AGI believes government must prioritize some of these interventions, subsidies or reliefs, not to disadvantage local industry.
The AGI president again requested government to ensure that lending rates are reduced.
A significant drop in policy rates from probably 26% to the current 21%, and as we are sensing, it could come down further with a drop in lending rates.
Chief Executive Officer of Universal Merchant Bank UMB, John Amwa, urged government to make resources available to expand the economy.
It is therefore commendable that the Ghanaian government has committed resources to make free senior high school policy a reality.
President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana, Christian Soti, charged businesses not to abuse the tax incentives provided by government.
The cost of doing business in Ghana must be well regulated by government to grow the economy and be able to compete with the developed world.
The presidential luncheon was on a theme, government subsidies and market interventions, the strategic approach to economic development.
Yeah. Now let's go to the Bank of Ghana. We're told that the Monetary Policy Committee has maintained the bank rate or policy rate at 21%. And exactly what does this mean, and what were the considerations in maintaining the rate? Nanekuya Mensah Brompa is there, has been listening to the governor of the Bank of Ghana, and will soon join us and tell us exactly what might have gone into the central bank maintaining the policy rate at 21%. Ekuya, exactly what were the considerations?
The policy rate has been maintained at 21% there, and reasons being that inflationary pressures needs to be monitored and looked at carefully by the central bank. That and more are reasons that were cited by the governor of the
sorry for that hitch there. Nanekua Mensa Brompa is there at the Bank of Ghana. The news is that the central bank has maintained the policy rate at 21%. We'll go back there and find out what considerations were taken in maintaining the rate. But let's move on. Now, seed growers in the western and central region say the high cost of electricity tariffs is killing their businesses. They complain the situation could affect the country's food production if not resolved.
The Grains and Legumes Development Board at Winneba is the largest in the country and serves the eastern, western and central regions. Seed growers within the western and central regions who patronize the facility say the high cost of electricity in seed production is a major impeder of the seed growing business. According to them, this will adversely affect the country's food production if nothing is done to reduce the production cost for growers. They noted, formerly, the business was booming because government was bearing the brunt of the cost. Thus, the prepaid system of electricity has become unbearable for them. A farmer may have to spend about 2,000 cedis worth of electricity for a wagon of maize at the first drying point before it goes through the shelling point, then back to the drying point again. To be able to attain the required level of moisture, which is 11%. Nangtongma Abdullahi is the president of the Seed Producers Association for the Western and Central regions.
We are appealing to the governor to come to our aid. If only he can absorb what he was doing previously, paying all the electricity. But here, this is the most important place for the farmers. And without the farmer coming here, it means that all his seed is useless.
Some of the farmers have resorted to sun drying, which is very tiresome and time-consuming, instead of machine drying due to the high cost of electricity. A seed inspector at the Grains and Legumes Development Board, Francis Kwao.
There's no seed security stock now. We will wish that he buys the seed we are producing this season. The government will use these seeds for the Food for Job program.
Also raised a similar issue where the oven for sterilizing soil for testing of seed is not functioning because the facility has been disconnected from the national grid due to debt. The seed conveyor at the shelling point also has broken down and needs to be fixed. The issue is the same at the cold room for the Grains and Legumes Development Board, Winneba, where the regional officer for the board, Charles Opoko, disclosed 5,000 cedis is spent on electricity every month to keep the room in operation.
The problem is that if you don't have enough stock in the cold room, that means the few farmers who have your stock here has to get that money to power the machine.
Opoko noted there was not a single bag of seeds in stock at the cold room for the next minor farming season due to the armyworm infestation that hit many farms last year.
And that's it for business. We're taking a break, and when we come back, there is sports. Welcome back. Let's get to Kumasi, the Ashanti regional capital. Reports of flooding in some part of the city. Northern Regional Bureau Chief Kofi Etudumfe is there. Kofi, good afternoon. And exactly what has happened where you are?
Well, I must say that from Sunday morning, as early as 5 a.m. till around 3 p.m. or 4 p.m., the rain came down very heavy in most parts of Kumasi. Indeed, it was very incessant, and most communities in the metropolis, as well as other places in the Ashanti region, were flooded. And these were what I would say very devastating flooding happening in most of these places. For instance, the Siasia River at Owadi, Kenyasi, and the Nkadam River at Afrancho had their banks overflowing, and most homes and roads were almost impossible to sail through. In the Afrancho township here in Kumasi, it was the hardest hit, and almost all the communities in these areas could not come out of their homes. As I speak to you now, the floods have subsided, but the major issues being brought to bear is the fact that buildings in waterways are increasingly becoming a phenomenon in most communities, and people in the environmental sectors are calling authorities to ensure that the communities are safe and gutters as well as drainages are disfiltered. I see. How many people have been displaced, and what is the response from authorities? The National Disaster Management Organization is yet to put a figure to the actual numbers of people that may have been affected by the flooding. But indeed, scores of communities, homes that were flooded are in their numbers. A lot of communities, places that hitherto never experienced flooding are currently experiencing floods. For instance, in areas, even residential areas like Darban, Atasamanso, Inshaiso, all these areas are experiencing flooding. In addition to the traditional areas of Abuabo, Aswati, among others, combined, you realize that the numbers are increasingly becoming worrisome in terms of flooding in the city. I'm grateful for your time with us. Kofi Edu-Dumfe is our Northern Regional Bureau Chief talking to us. We'll give you more on that later on. Up next, I'm sure you have heard about the One Corner craze. Acclaimed UK-based Ghanaian music icon Sonny Badu thinks that craze is getting out of hand and must be checked. He is cautioning it could lead to loss of lives.
It's been barely 2 months after the One Corner dance went viral. Patronage has been crazily remarkable. Prominent showbiz icons have been at the forefront of the craze, recording videos of what One Corner means to them. There's, however, been some over-the-top reactions, especially from extremely zealous fans. Celebrated gospel musician Sonny Badu has raised red flags over the craze, which has taken an extreme turn.
My concern, the first concern, is it's getting dangerous. It is getting quite dangerous. Why is it getting dangerous? I saw someone climb an electric pole. I saw someone climb a tipper track. I saw someone run under a car. I saw someone dancing whilst cars were moving. Now this is getting out of hands. This is getting dangerous. Do you want to wait until you hear somebody dead before you say, I did not know you One Corner Since I got you, don't put rubbish.
All right, we will not go into any corner. We'll stay in our studios and deliver the news. We're grateful for your time with us. Thanks so much for you watching, and to the team here. There's more on 3news.com and of course on News 360 and News at 10. My name is Bright Nanafo. Have a good afternoon.